Let's get right into it. Number 8. Walking into a pharmacy and buying heroin for your kids. Right now, if you walked into a drugstore and asked for heroin to give to your 5-year-old, you'd be arrested before you even reach the counter. Child endangerment, illegal substance, distribution, probably terrorism charges by mistake. But back in 1900, you wouldn't just get it, they'd recommend it. Yes, heroin was sold over the counter as a children's cough medicine. Not underground, not in back alleys. At your local pharmacy, with smiling clerks and glass bottles labeled safe and non-addictive. Bayer, the same company that still makes aspirin today, began mass-producing diacetylmorphine in 1898 and branded it, didn't hide it. They advertised it. In fact, medical journals from the time called it a remedy of great value and free from the toxic effects of morphine. One doctor wrote in The Lancet, "Children suffering from persistent cough are greatly relieved by small doses of heroin." Small doses for children. Think about that. We panic if a kid accidentally eats half a Tylenol. But a century ago, parents were spoon-feeding them processed opium derivatives because the label said doctor approved. And it wasn't just heroin. Cocaine was in everything. Toothache drops, energy tonics, even baby powders. There was a product called cocaine tooth drops marketed directly to mothers. The packaging read, "Harmless for all ages. Fretful babies." Harmless. By 1912, the American Medical Association reported that over 400,000 Americans were addicted to patent medicines containing cocaine or opium. Many of them women and children who had never touched illegal drugs, only followed doctors' orders. So, ask yourself, if we trusted our doctors and scientists so completely, how did we end up dosing toddlers with opioids? Was it ignorance? Greed? Or did we simply not understand addiction until it was too late? Because here's the chilling part. We didn't ban these products until people started dying in large numbers. Babies stopped breathing in their cribs. Toddlers became lethargic, then unresponsive. And only then did society say, wait, maybe this isn't okay. In 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act finally cracked down, but not because the government suddenly cared. It was public pressure. Outrage funerals. Today we look back and think, how could they be so stupid? But what are we doing now that future generations will shake their heads at? What safe, FDA-approved thing are we giving our kids today that they'll outlaw in 2050? Number 7, spitting on the floor of a restaurant on purpose. Imagine walking into a fancy hotel lobby in 1905. Marble floors, chandeliers, men. In top hats, sipping brandy, and right in the middle of it all, a brass spittoon filled with someone else's phlegm. Not gross accident. This was normal, expected, even polite. In fact, if you didn't spit in the spittoon, people might think you were hiding tuberculosis. Yes, public spitting was so common. Cities installed thousands of spittoons in schools, courtrooms, theaters, and trains. Some were ornate works of art, others doubled as footrests. Businessmen would lean back, prop their boots up, and hawk a loogie, all while discussing stock prices. A 1908 article in the New York Times described how the average man spat 5 to 6 times per hour in public spaces. 5 to 6 times per hour, and no one blinked. Why? Because germs weren't understood yet. The idea of airborne disease transmission was still new. People thought illness came from bad air or moral weakness, not microscopic organisms flying out of your mouth when you coughed. So when tuberculosis exploded across America, killing 1 in 7 people by the early 1900s, no one connected. It too spitting. At first, then came Dr. Lawrence Flick, a Philadelphia physician who declared in 1899 every tuberculous person who expectorates on the street is guilty of murder. Morally, if not legally, asterisk murder. That's a strong word. But he meant it. He launched one of the first anti-spitting campaigns in U.S. history. Posters went up, "Stop the killer habit." Cities passed laws. In New York, you could be fined $500 for spitting, equivalent to $15,000 today. They hired spit police to patrol subway stations. In Chicago, Officers carried long poles with cloths to wipe up fresh spit and arrest the offender. Can you imagine that today? A cop following you around with a mop because you coughed without covering your mouth? Yet in 1910, that was real. So why did it work? Because once people saw the danger, once they understood that a casual spit could kill, behavior changed fast, which brings us to a disturbing question. If we criminalized spitting over a century ago for public health, why didn't we do the same during the COVID-19 pandemic? People were still coughing on planes, sneezing in grocery stores, refusing masks. Tens of thousands died, but no one got arrested for spreading the virus. Is it because enforcement is harder now? Or because we've lost the collective will to prioritize public safety over personal freedom? Food for thought. Number 6, mailing your toddler through the postal system. You cannot make this up. In 1914, a couple in Ohio packed their 10-pound baby into a cardboard box, slapped on 15 cents worth of stamps, and handed him to the U.S. Post Office. Their son, May Piersdorf, age 5, was shipped 73 miles by train, not as cargo, but as mail. And guess what? It was completely legal. The U.S. Postal Service had just introduced parcel post service for packages over 4 pounds. Someone looked at a chubby toddler and thought, package no law said children couldn't be mailed, so parents started doing it. Why? Asterisk, because it was cheaper than a train ticket. Yes, mailing. Your kid cost less than buying them a seat. One family sent their child from Mississippi to Louisiana for 37 cents. Another mailed twins together in a single crate labeled fragile. Handle with care. And before you picture babies stuffed into mail bags like letters, no, they usually traveled with the mail clerk, a trusted employee. Kind of like an early version of Uber Kids, but still. You're telling me a government agency accepted a live human being as mail and insured him? Because yes, the Piersdorfs insured little May for $50, adjusted for inflation. That's about $1,500. Meanwhile, an iPhone case today costs more than that, so let's pause. Ask yourself, how does a system designed for parcels fail to distinguish between a toaster and a toddler? Was it negligence? Absurdity? Or just the logical endpoint of bureaucracy? Meeting parental laziness? Eventually, the Postmaster General caught wind and issued a blunt decree: children are not mailable. Asterisk, finally. But here's the twist. This didn't stop immediately. As late as the 1950s, there were reports of parents trying to mail infants during holidays, only to be turned away. And in 2019, a woman in Russia attempted to send her 11-year-old son to his grandmother via courier service. He arrived malnourished and traumatized. Same logic, different century. So again, what normal parenting decision today might seem criminally negligent in 50 years? Screen time. Formula feeding? Letting your kid walk to school alone? When does convenience cross the line into neglect? We may not know until it's too late. Number 5. Asterisk carrying a gun to church, just in case. Right now, if you walked into a church armed with a pistol, security would tackle you before you reached the pew. But in 1830s Alabama, you'd be considered responsible, in fact. Some churches had designated gun racks near the entrance, like coat check areas. Men brought rifles and revolvers to Sunday service, not to start trouble, but to protect themselves from slave uprisings. Native American raids or rival families. One pastor in Tennessee reportedly kept a shotgun behind the pulpit, said it helped him preach with authority. Seriously. And this wasn't rare, according to historian Adam Winkler, author of Gunfight: The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms in America. Armed worship was common throughout the South and frontier states well into the 20th century, even in places without violence. Guns were seen as symbols of manhood, readiness, and civic duty. So when someone stood up during sermon to challenge another man's honor, they didn't argue. They stepped outside and dueled. Yes, church duels happened in 1806. 2 Kentucky politicians argued during Mass, stormed out, and shot each other dead in the churchyard. No arrests. Why? Asterisk. Because settling disputes through violence was culturally accepted. Honor mattered more than peace. Fast forward to today, if someone pulled a gun during a sermon, even to defend others, they'd likely face charges unless lives were actively in danger. But back then, it was normal, which raises a provocative question. Has our relationship with guns become too restrictive? Or did we finally grow up? Some say carrying firearms everywhere increases safety. Others say it turns every disagreement into a potential massacre. But consider this. In the 1800s, there were no background checks, no training requirements, no concealed carry permits. Just a gun, a grudge, and a prayer. And yet, annual homicide rates were lower than they are in some U.S. cities today? Or were they? Asterisk, actually, data is spotty. But according to FBI archives and historical crime studies, violent crimes spiked dramatically in urban areas after industrialization, suggesting that context matters more than weapon access alone. Still, would we ever go back to gun racks in churches? Probably not. But in states like Texas and Idaho, where open carry is legal, you can walk into a place of worship with a rifle on your shoulder. No one stops you so. The past isn't gone. It's just waiting. Number 4. Forcing women to take IQ tests before getting married. Sounds like dystopian fiction. But between 1914 and 1935, several U.S. states required women to pass mental fitness exams before issuing marriage licenses. Why? Because lawmakers feared feeble-minded women would reproduce and weaken the national stock. Yes, this was part of the eugenics movement, pseudoscientific racism, disguised as public health. And it wasn't fringe, it was mainstream. Harvard professors endorsed it. The Supreme Court upheld it. In the infamous 1927 case Buck v. Bell, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. ruled that forced sterilization was constitutional and infamously declared, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. The 3 generations? A mother, her daughter, and her infant granddaughter, none of whom were actually mentally disabled, all targeted because they were poor, unmarried, and deemed promiscuous. Now imagine this. You're a young woman in 1920s Virginia. Want to marry the love of your life, but first, you must prove you're not genetically unfit. They give you an IQ test written in English. Even if you're a non-native speaker, questions include things like, who wrote Hamlet? Where is France located? What causes thunder? Fail. You can't get married. Or worse, you're sent to a state institution and sterilized for the good of society. Over 60,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized under eugenics laws, mostly women, minorities, disabled people, and the poor. And it wasn't just the U.S. Nazi Germany. Studied American eugenics policies closely. In fact, Hitler praised us laws in Mein Kampf and modeled his own racial hygiene program after ours. So ask yourself, how does a democracy pass laws that strip citizens of reproductive rights, not because of crime, but because of perceived intelligence? Was it science? No. Modern genetics has debunked eugenics entirely. Intelligence is complex, influenced by environment, education, trauma, nutrition, not just DNA. Was it fear? Absolutely. Fear of immigrants, fear of poverty, fear of losing cultural control. And yet echoes remain. Today, women on welfare are sometimes pressured to use long-term birth control. Incarcerated women have been illegally sterilized as recently as 2020 in California prisons. The methods changed, the mindset, not always. So here's the uncomfortable truth. We banned eugenics, but we haven't fully reckoned with its legacy. And until we do, it could return in new forms. Gene editing, AI-driven reproduction screening, CRISPR babies. Science moves fast. Morality, not so much. Number 3, owning a pet monkey as a status symbol. Right now. Keeping a chimpanzee in your suburban home would land you in court fast. Animal cruelty, public endangerment, violation of exotic species laws. But in the 1920s, it was fashionable. High society women in New York and London walked monkeys on leashes, dressed them in tiny sweaters, took them to dinner parties. One heiress, Isabel Davis. Lived with a capuchin named Mr. Hobbs who slept in a four-poster bed and ate caviar off silver plates another. Texas Gwinnett, the famous speakeasy queen, performed on stage with her pet chimp, wearing a tuxedo, and no one batted an eye. Why? Because wild animals were seen as curiosities, not sentient beings with rights. Zoos displayed humans in cages next to apes. Scientists believed primates couldn't feel pain like we do. Conservation didn't exist, so when a monkey bit someone, it was provoked, they'd say. When one escaped and attacked a neighbor, he just wanted to play. But then came Charlie, the chimp. In 1931, Charlie lived with a family in Connecticut. Seemed fine. Until one day, he snapped, attacked the homeowner, bitten severely. Needed dozens of stitches. Media went wild. Headlines screamed, "Monkey madness. Jungle terror in suburbia." Public opinion shifted overnight. Within 2 years, multiple states passed laws banning private ownership of primates. But was it about safety? Or was it about control? Because here's what most people don't know. Monkeys raised in homes often suffer extreme psychological damage. They're taken from mothers at birth, forced to suppress natural behaviors, trained to act human, and when they hit puberty, they become aggressive, unpredictable, traumatized, not because they're wild, because we made them broken. So whose fault is it when they lash out? The animal or the people who treated them like toys? Today, owning a primate requires special permits, inspections, and ethical justification good. But we still exploit animals for entertainment, exotic pets, TikTok stars. Safari parks. We've evolved, but not enough. And every time a tiger escapes a backyard cage or a dolphin dies in captivity, we repeat the same mistake, thinking nature can be owned. It can't. Number 2, being arrested for being poor. Imagine this. You miss a rent payment. Not because you're lazy, because your boss cut your hours. Your car broke down. Your kid got sick. Next thing you know, bailiffs show up at your door and throw you in jail. No trial, no hearing, just darkness. This wasn't rare. From the 1700s to the late 1800s, debtors' prisons were standard across America and Europe. If you owed money, even $5, creditors could have you locked up indefinitely. And where were you held? Not in state-run facilities. In private jails, run for profit. Want food? Pay the warden. Need a blanket? Pay extra sick. Hope you can afford medicine because no one's giving it free. Worst part? Couldn't work while imprisoned, so your debt grew daily. Interest, fees, jail, taxes. You went in owing $20, came out owing $500, or never came out at all. Charles. Dickens knew this horror firsthand. At 12 years old, his father was sent to Marshalsea Prison for debt. Young Charles was forced to leave school. Worked 10-hour days in a rat-infested warehouse, watch his family crumble. Later, he wrote Little Dorrit, a novel set entirely in a debtor's prison in it. He wrote it as a world within itself where misery breeds upon misery. Powerful words. But did they change anything? Slowly, by the mid-1800s. Reformers pushed to abolish debt imprisonment. In 1833, the U.S. ended federal debtors' prisons, but locally, they lingered as late as 2018. Courts in Alabama and Georgia were still jailing people for unpaid fines, mostly low-income black Americans. One woman in Georgia was locked up for failing to pay $2,200 in traffic tickets. She stayed for 6 years. 6 years for traffic debt. So tell me, have we really abolished debtors' prisons or just renamed them? Today, we don't lock people up directly for being broke, but we do it indirectly. Unpaid medical bills gives wage, garnishment gives eviction, gives homelessness, gives arrest for loitering or sleeping in public. The cycle continues. And the rich, they file bankruptcy, rebuild credit, walk away clean. So whose fault is poverty? Is it personal failure or systemic design? Because if being poor keeps landing you in handcuffs, isn't that modern-day debtor's prison? Number 1, killing a baby girl and facing 0 consequences? You're probably thinking, that's impossible. No society allows infanticide, but for thousands of years, it was routine. In ancient China, Girls were drowned at birth, called baby smashing. In India, female infants were buried alive or left to die in fields. In Rome, fathers had the legal right to decide whether a newborn lived, and gender was a major factor. Why? Because daughters were expensive dowries, no inheritance rights, seen as burdens. Historian Judith Farquhar notes that during China's Qing dynasty, up to 25% of baby girls were killed or abandoned. Not hidden crimes. Open practice and no punishment. In fact, some communities encouraged it. Fast forward to the 20th century, infanticide declined, but sex-selective abortion rose, thanks to ultrasound technology. Parents could choose, and in countries like India and China, they chose boys. A 2019 UN report estimated that over 140 million women are missing. Globally, due to gender-based elimination through selective abortion, neglect, or infanticide, 140 million. That's more than the entire population of Japan. And yet how many of us talk about this? We condemn ISIS for atrocities, but stay silent when millions of girls vanish quietly. Generation after generation, today laws exist to prevent sex selection, but enforcement? Weak in rural India, clinics still offer gender detection services. For cash, in Vietnam, son preference remains strong, and in parts of Africa, twin girls are sometimes seen as cursed. So here's the hardest question of all. If we call genocide a crime against humanity, what do we call the systematic erasure of an entire gender? Is it culture, tradition, or just quiet, normalized murder? Because if something is legal, widespread, and socially accepted, does that make it right? Stree says no. Slavery was legal. Segregation was normal, and mailing children was once perfectly fine. So what's the lesson? That morality evolves, but only when we force it to. Only when we look at the past, not with judgment, but with vigilance, because the things we find unthinkable today, they were all normal once, and the things we accept now, it might be crimes tomorrow. That's all for today. If you made it this far, thank you. This video took hours of research, pulling from academic journals, historical records, and survivor testimonies. If you learned something, share it, because awareness is the first step toward change. And subscribe because we'll keep uncovering the truths, because they didn't teach you in school. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and remember, normal doesn't mean right.